Controversial opinion, but I think by 2025-2026, Alejandro Garnacho and Amad Diallo are still at Manchester United, whilst the Brazilian Antony has either left the club or is considered by many to be an inferior player to Amad and Garnacho. Now, of course, I am making this call very prematurely, and this is only a prediction. I do think Antony does have the potential to be that good, but with him 2/3 of the way through his first United season, I do have my doubts, and you'll see what I mean when I come on to analysing his FB Ref report, where some of his creative metrics are disappointing at best and highly concerning at worst. However, this is obviously just a early prediction, and I certainly wouldn't write Antony off becoming a top level player and being a success at United. But as I said for Jadon Sancho a couple of months ago, in a video that will be in the description, I think Antony could benefit tremendously from a change in position and role in Ten Hag's system. So I think Antony is in danger of becoming the first flop of this Ten Hag era, but I do think that Ten Hag can get the best out of him with this simple tactical change that I think will be effective. Now, over the last few months since the Premier League restarted again after the World Cup, I have been very disappointed with Antony's end product in the final third, being very predictable and one-footed and seeming to not really know what he should do when he gets the ball. Now, a lot of Manchester United fans don't like when you criticise players individually, but I think that's just the mindset of a deluded fan base. If you can't criticise individual players, then you end up with a culture around the players and the club like what United had with Solskjaer, where players can't actively take on advice and improve from their criticisms, and start to react negatively to any comments about their downturn in form. Anyone who has watched Antony in any detail recently will surely come to the same conclusion as me. He's definitely a talented player, a very good technical player, but he's very predictable and one-footed. Whenever he gets the ball on the right side, you always know what he wants to do. He's always looking to cut in on his left foot and either look for a pass or a shot. And if I know this sitting at home, then the defenders in front of him definitely know this, and it seems like they've worked out his game. In his first few games, defenders hadn't quite got the gist of how Antony likes to move, how he waits for a fullback to commit before moving the ball quickly and racing forward, and so now fullbacks just stand him up. And as long as they don't allow that space to develop so he can cut in on his left and instead force him down the flank on his right, then a lot of Antony's best attributes are negated. And this was a massive problem against Arsenal, as there were a number of times where United had great opportunities to break, with Antony progressing the ball forward with the ball at his feet, and he either overran it or just picked the wrong pass, or sometimes just takes too long to release the ball. And so at the moment, I think it's definitely his decision making which is letting him down. And so this means that from an offensive point of view, apart from his ability to cut inside and release that fantastic curling shot into the far corner with his left foot, I don't think Antony offers Ten Hag's side much from that right side, and we can use his FB Ref report over the past 365 days to see this statistically. So as I said, over the last 365 days, Antony has played a total of 1,344 minutes. And these are only his minutes for Manchester United which are being calculated, so his Ajax metrics are excluded. And so just from first glance, we can see that he's having a high amount of shots, and he's getting a high percentage of those on target. However, looking at his non-penalty XG, you can see he's ranking around the 60th percentile, but just the 41st percentile for his non-penalty goals, and he underperforms his non-penalty XG by 0.05, showing that Antony's shooting ability may not be as clinical as we first perceive. But it's when we look at his chance creating metrics when we can see how dire his situation is. He ranks in just the 2nd percentile for his XG assisted, the 1st percentile for his overall assists, the 10th percentile for his key passes, the 6th percentile for his expected assists, just the 33rd percentile for his passes into the final third, and the 34th percentile for his passes into the penalty area. And even for things like crosses into the penalty area, he ranks in just the 27th percentile and only around the 50th percentile for his overall progressive passes. And so we can see that when it comes to Antony's production and ability to create chances via his passing, it's pretty much non-existent. Not just in terms of actually creating high quality goal scoring opportunities for his teammates, but also when it comes to just progressing the ball into the final third and into the box. But even when we look at some other metrics that you probably would expect him to be excelling at, he still disappoints. He ranks surprisingly in just the 51st percentile for his dribbles completed, and just the 24th percentile for the percentage of his successful dribbles. Now, alongside that curling shot into the far post, another area of Antony's game where he does seem to excel is his progressive carries and his carries into the final third. However, I don't think he does enough when he's actually able to carry the ball into these types of areas, often turning back and looking for a pass backwards, rather than looking to carry the ball into the penalty area, or isolate the fullback in a 1v1 and go past him. And so we can see clearly that Antony's criticism isn't just coming from people watching him and deciding they don't really like his aesthetic, which does happen to some players who look clunky or not as smooth as other players in certain situations, but they still produce the offensive output. And Antony isn't just failing to produce the output that you would expect from a Manchester United starting player, but he's producing, or not producing should I say, the sort of output that would have questions around his Manchester United future had he been a player who came from the academy rather than a player who cost £85 million. However, there is obviously something there with Antony. I think when you look at a winger like Antony Elanga, you see someone who could potentially be a decent option, a good squad player, but not necessarily someone who has that elite level potential. With Antony, I definitely think he has potential, it's his current ability which is a problem. I mean, technically he's definitely a skillful player, being a player that has very good ball control in tight, congested areas, whilst also having that piece of flair which, whilst can be criticised, definitely gives a player an advantage in certain situations. And to be honest, I think his ability to cut inside on his left and release that curling left-footed shot into the far corner is arguably one of the best in the world. Is very similar to players like David Beckham or Ian Robben, who had a certain skill down to a T, and so by improving other areas of his game, this is going to allow him to get into these types of shooting positions where he can really take advantage of this skill set. I think Antony is currently suffering from a similar sort of problem to the one that Jadon Sancho is suffering from, and the one that Marcus Rashford was suffering from last season. And that is indecisiveness, which comes from a lack of confidence in one's ability. And this is usual. After all, at Ajax he was in his comfort zone, he was in a league that is not near the same level in terms of defensive ability as a Premier League, in terms of individual players. And he's also obviously got a lot more pressure at United, with every single mistake being closely analysed. And so this isn't a problem that's only unique to Antony, it happens with a lot of players, particularly after a big move to a big club. But now that we've looked at Antony in some depth, let's analyse the two players who are going to be competing with him for his spot in the United squad over the next few years. But before I go any further, let me tell you about something that may interest anyone who is or wants to be a YouTuber. And that is that I will now be open to doing any reviews of any videos or channels that you have. If you are interested in anything below, then email me at atlantisfootball96@gmail.com with the type of review you want and a link to the video or channel you want me to review, and then I can just drop you my PayPal and send you over the review when it's done. If you are just starting out YouTube, then you don't need the detailed video review for any of your first few videos. I'd just go with the standard review, which will be basically my initial reaction to your video, giving you a few improvements that you can make and some things about the video that you should be doubling down on. Also, if you don't have a video but instead have an article or a blog, I'll include that in the standard review as well, so you can send me those as well. Once you're a bit more familiar with producing videos on YouTube, then maybe you can think about the detailed video review or even the whole channel review, where I'll put together a much more detailed review, giving you a lot more suggestions for improvements and providing some examples as well. I assume most of the videos will be football related, though you can also send me over any non-football ones as well if you want. But I'm not going to be reviewing any nerd shit like WWE or Minecraft, so don't send me those types of videos. But if you are interested in any of that, send me over an email, and of course thank you in advance for helping to support the channel. So we'll start off with Alejandro Garnacho, because I think he's a perfect player to compare with Antony, because both are young Manchester United wingers but operate on different flanks, so it's an easy comparison to make. So Garnacho to me is a natural winger who's best suited to holding his width on the flank and looking to isolate his fullback in a 1v1 situation. And whereas I criticise Antony for being indecisive when he's about to take on a man, often seeming reluctant to burst down the outside and instead holding on to the ball and looking for a pass backwards, Garnacho is the exact opposite, as every time he receives the ball on the flank, he's always looking to drive at the opposition fullback and commit the defender. And unlike Antony, whose one-footedness prevents him from really being a threat down the line, Garnacho, when on the left side, has the ability to either burst down the outside on his left foot or look to cut back in on his right and release a shot. And I think just from watching the two, you can tell that Garnacho is a superior dribbler, but the statistics back this up as well, as Garnacho ranks in the 96th percentile for his progressive carries, the 94th for his carries into the final third, and the 99th percentile for his carries into the penalty area, whilst also ranking in the 74th percentile for his successful take-ons. And so we can see that in terms of progressing the ball via carrying it forward at your feet, Garnacho is not just superior to Antony, but he's one of the best in Europe at the moment. Now, whilst Garnacho does excel when it comes to ball carry and taking on players in 1v1s, and his ability to score from shooting opportunities around the box, like Antony, he is a youngster who has major deficiencies in his game that will without doubt have to be improved upon if he wants to reach the top level. In terms of chance creation, he's certainly producing more output than Antony, with his XG assisted rate sitting in the 22nd percentile, though this is still fairly underwhelming once you consider how good Garnacho is when it comes to his dribbling and shooting. And in order to improve his chance creating ability, Garnacho is going to have to develop his vision, as well as his weight and timing of a pass in the final third. But the issue I have with Garnacho at the moment is that he offers pretty much nothing when it comes to progressing the play via his passing, as he ranks in the 2nd percentile or lower for his key passes, passes into the final third, and passes into the penalty area, showing just how dependent he is on his ball carrying and his one-on-one dribbling. And so at the moment, I'd describe Garnacho as a young, naturally talented, skillful winger, who like Antony has already showcased his goal scoring ability, but also like the Brazilian, he needs to add progressive passing and chance creation to his game as well. And so you could draw up a lot of similarities between Garnacho now and Ronaldo's first season at United in 03-04. Amad Diallo, who's currently on loan at Sunderland on the other hand, is a bit different to both Garnacho and Antony, as Amad is closer stylistically to a natural central attacking midfielder, being a lot more comfortable receiving the ball in central positions, whereas at the moment Antony, but especially Garnacho, are a lot more limited to receiving the ball in wider positions. If I was to compare Amad to anyone, it would be Riyad Mahrez, as they are stylistically similar, with both players being left-footed right wingers who have tremendous ball control, which enables them to shift the ball quickly from one side to the other, navigating their way through congested areas. And because Amad can either wrong foot the defender and then burst down the outside on his right foot, or cut inside on his left foot and release a curling shot towards the far corner, he has the exact type of unpredictability when he's dribbling that Antony desperately needs to incorporate in his game. Amad, like Antony and Garnacho, is phenomenal when he's able to cut in from the flank onto his stronger left foot, and I'd probably say his shooting ability from these sorts of positions is just as good as Antony. As well as Antony is a master at curling the ball into that far corner, Amad also has the ability to bend one in the far corner, but has greater variety with his shots, which I think definitely bodes well for him potentially being used in a more central position by Ten Hag. Now, in order to make this transition, Amad would have to work on his chance creating ability, as when compared against every other attacking midfielder in the next top 8 leagues below the top 5, Amad ranks just in the 16th percentile for his XG assisted, with a rate of 0.1 per 90. Now, if Garnacho is the best dribbler of the three, I would definitely say that Amad is the best passer. And I think by this time next year, with another season of development, Amad Diallo will have overtaken Antony in the pecking order to be Ten Hag's first choice right winger. And I say this because I just think Amad is a more complete player. He's got better ball control, and he's a lot less predictable and erratic than Antony in possession, which I think is where a lot of the Brazilians' problems stem from, with him often taking too long in possession, not being decisive enough, and taking the risk-averse option far too often. But as I said at the start of the video, I do think there is talent inside of Antony that Ten Hag needs to unlock. And the way I would go about doing this is by immediately switching Antony over to the left flank, which may be an issue for the side as a whole, as obviously that is where Garnacho and Marcus Rashford's primary position is. But if we are just focusing on Antony for the minute, I do think he'd be better off on the left flank. On the left, he wouldn't be able to do his trademark cut inside and bend the ball into the far corner, but he would now have the ability to go down the outside of a fullback, which I think would actually suit him, as he has the ball control, trickery, and the acceleration to burst past players on the outside. When he's on the right, he's not able to do this, because obviously if he bursts infield, more often than not he's moving closer to the other players into a congested zone where there's little space. But when he goes down the outside, he doesn't have this problem. And I think the main difference that we'll see is that Antony will no longer slow down the attack, as he won't have to constantly be looking to cut inside on his left foot, and instead can burst down the outside of the player, carrying the ball forward into the final third, which is an area of his game which he is fairly proficient in. And in the same way that players like Leroy Sané and Ryan Giggs were left-footed pacey players who thrived when playing on the left flank because of their ability to go down the outside of the fullback, I think Antony could be the same, and if he's also able to incorporate the ability to cross accurately when on the run, then I think his overall game will dramatically improve, and he'll go from a winger who at the moment doesn't do much apart from the odd goal when he cuts inside, to a left winger who's constantly able to cause his fullback problems, progressing the play down the left flank and creating chances when in the final third. Also, for the rest of the season, I would maybe like Ten Hag to experiment with using Antony as a false 9. The reason I say this is that we know that Ten Hag likes to deploy a deep lying forward in Weghorst who drops off from the forward line to link the play, but if Antony was to be used as a striker, he could be used more as a false 9, dropping a lot deeper and essentially being tasked with floating into the space behind the opposition's midfield, looking to then receive the ball and use his ability to turn quickly past players and drive the attack forward. We have seen that he is capable of doing this on the flank, where he receives the ball with his back to goal and quickly spins and drives past the defender, and I think he could also do this from a central position, which would be a lot more valuable for the whole side. But of course, shifting Antony to one of these positions isn't going to immediately make him a top level player. In order to do that, he has to work on the deficiencies that I spoke about at the start of the video, and ultimately has to produce more output in terms of his ball progression into the final third, and most importantly his chance creation when in the final third, as only when he's producing high quality creative output can he really be considered a top level player. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, remember to subscribe to the channel, and you can go to the description to check out some of my other videos as well. Put your thoughts in the comments section on Antony below, and you can follow my Instagram and Twitter for more content as well.